Oh, hello, good morning. Welcome to this latest in a series of webinars from Bamford Media. My name is Martin Bamford. Very warm welcome to the call. Today's subject is leveraging the power of persuasion. And this one's based on a blog post I wrote earlier this year, which proved to be very popular. And I really wanted to dive into a bit more detail about the 6 scientifically proven elements of persuasion, what we call the weapons of influence. It's based on some earlier work from about 35 years ago by a chap called Dr. Robert Cialdini, who wrote a brilliant book called Influence. And all about persuasion, about the psychology of persuasion, how we behave as human animals, human creatures, how we're influenced by things, what we can learn from that within our own marketing. So during the call, please do use the chat box to the side of your screen to say hello, let me know you're watching, let me know what you think. And at the bottom of the screen, you've also got the open questions area. Feel free to ask questions as you go along, and I'll invite questions as well at the end. But any subject that we cover in this call, ask questions about, comments on. Noel says he can only see my forehead. Some people would think that's probably a good thing. What about I tilt that down a little bit? Is that better? I think I'm in that camera. I can do this for a second, Noel, so you can see my whole head, if that helps. But yeah, please do ask questions as we go along. As I say, I'll invite some more at the end of the call as well. By way of very brief introduction, if you've not come across me before or not met me before, my name's Martin Bamford. I'm a chartered financial planner, a fellow of the Personal Finance Society, and as well as running a firm of chartered financial planners called Informed Choice, I am the founder and CEO of Bamford Media, and we're a creative agency working predominantly with financial planners and in the financial services sector to produce compelling content which helps people to retain and engage with their ideal clients. That's what we do in a nutshell. I will switch that back if I can to, I've lost my bit to get back to it. There we go. Switch it back to the slides. That one there almost, and that one there, and that one. There we go. So you can see at the bottom of the screen. So the power of persuasion. What are we talking about today? As I mentioned, this is based on Influence, the Psychology of Persuasion, which is a fairly old book now. It's had a few updates and a few new additions, but Professor Robert Cialdini wrote this, and it contained a series of, based on his research, 6 weapons of influence, which when applied properly can completely transform your results when it comes to marketing. And I think before going into these 6 and explaining how to practically apply them to your marketing, to your traditional and digital marketing, I wanted to sort of caveat this with the note that this isn't about manipulation or trying to trick somebody. This is solely about understanding the human psyche and what drives us to make decisions, how we make our decisions. I'm fascinated by this whole field of behavioural science, and behavioural finance is becoming a really big topic within the financial planning sector, I know as well. But it's just fascinating, how human minds work, how our minds work, the shortcuts we take, the heuristics we use to make decisions. And I think by understanding these better and then applying them in every aspect of what we do in our marketing, we can get some really, really powerful results. As I say, it's not about manipulation or trickery. This isn't some dark art. We're not trying to make people do things against their will. It's that nudge. We're just trying to give them a bit of help to make the correct decision, to make it easier to make the decisions that are beneficial for both them and for us. So with that preface in place, really, I'm going to go through the 6 different weapons of influence in this call. I'm going to talk about how we can practically apply them to your financial planner marketing and increase conversion rates. This is really about going from inquiry to engagement and increasing the probability of that happening. It doesn't address filling the funnel. It doesn't address really generating inquiries in the first place, although it should help a little with those if you apply them well. But it should be about, once you've got your prospective client in your sales funnel, at the top of your sales funnel, how you can more easily work them through down to engagement. So let's dive into the various principles with number 1. And the first principle is likability, the liking principle. As it says there, we're more likely to comply with requests made by people we like. And when put like that, it's quite a simple simple statement, isn't it? But people we like have greater perceived credibility. And recently at our summit, the Financial Planner Marketing Summit in Guildford, we heard from one of the speakers, Herman Brody, who's co-author of a book called The Trust Mandate, where he did an awful lot of research into what causes us to trust people, particularly within financial services, within wealth management. And Herman spoke about the importance of benevolence. Now, within financial planning, what we see so often is financial planners putting a great deal of emphasis not on benevolence, but on qualifications and status and experience. But I think that benevolence and likability count for just as much as experience, qualifications, etc., if not more, when it comes to whether or not we trust somebody. Now, the people we like tend to be people who share similar beliefs to us, tend to be people who share similar interests to us. It's much easier to get on with somebody and like somebody if we can find those points of commonality. And they're also people who tend to use the same language we use. I'm not talking about English or French or German, but the same types of words, the same sorts of language. Now, I had an example of this during a group coaching call we ran yesterday lunchtime with a few delegates that came to a financial planning marketing summit. And we were talking about keyword research for a website. And one of the ladies on the call said, well, the stuff that I assume people search for isn't the stuff they actually search for. And what she meant by that was people don't type into their search bar flexible income drawdown. They might type in, how do I take money from my pension pot? So I think we've got to think about the language our clients use and be really conscious when we're listening to our clients and prospective clients of the sorts of languages, sorts of words, sorts of terminology they use. I had an example of this years ago. I was meeting with a financial planning client. I was prattling on about estate planning. And she stopped me, this client, and she said, I don't have an estate. And that was a real wake-up call moment for me. And I realized we use terminology like estate planning, and that's industry terminology, it's profession terminology. It's not client terminology. And ever since that day, I've made it my mission not to refer to estate planning, but to refer to inheritance tax planning, because it's simple language. It's the language that our clients use. Now, what our minds do, and this is why the likability principle is so important, our minds convince us that if we like somebody, we trust them. Otherwise, we wouldn't like them. So it's that simple. And I think one big example of this in marketing we've seen in recent years is this huge rise in social media influencers. Now, these are people we've probably never met, but we see them online on Twitter or Instagram or Facebook. They've built huge communities, and they're able to very successfully promote their products or services from other organizations, other brands, because we get the feeling we know them and we like them and we trust them. And that's the liking principle at play with influencer marketing. Now, there are several factors, according to the scientific research, that drive likability, whether or not somebody likes you. One is physical attractiveness. I know that's quite a tough one to start with, but the way you dress, the way you present yourself, obviously personal hygiene, making sure you're well groomed, etc. That's an important part of likability. Similarity is another factor. So similarity is about, can we relate to that person, as a human, fellow human being? Are they similar to us in terms of their approach to the life, their lifestyle, their behavior, etc. Compliments. Now, compliments are an interesting one. When we compliment somebody and say, you're a wonderful human being, they're more likely to like us than when we don't. So compliments used well can be a very effective way to build trust. And the lesson here from a digital marketing perspective when it comes to compliments is, rather than using social media to just broadcast all the time, move to having some more intimate conversations. And then that can make a really big difference. Cooperation. People who fight the same causes as we do, they fight in our corner, they sit on the same side of the table as us. Cooperation is a really big factor. So it's about alignment of interests. So if you're engaging with a new client and you find common ground and you cooperate to work together to find a solution, that's a really big factor behind likability. And also association, the ability to associate with the values that somebody holds. So that's the first principle, likability, the liking principle. The second one is reciprocity. The reciprocity principle. In many social situations, we pay back what we receive from others. And I find this one fascinating. There's a really good study out there to illustrate this one, which I will run through in just a second. But this is about social obligation. This is about the feeling that when someone gives us something, that we feel socially obliged to give them something back. And out of all of the 6 weapons of influence, this is the one I think I feel slightly nervous about. I mentioned earlier at the start of the call, this isn't about trying to manipulate somebody or trying to trick somebody, but this one is scarily powerful because of that sense of social obligation. Now, the study, which I find really interesting, because it's a real life practical example of how this works, and we've all seen it done but probably didn't realise why it was being done at the time. And that's when you go to a restaurant and you get the bill at the end of your meal, and the waiter or waitress brings over your bill on a nice little silver tray, and they give it to you with a mint. And why do they give you a mint? Are they being nice? Are they just saying, well, you've had a meal, you may have had some garlic bread, you want something to sort of freshen your breath up before you leave for the car? The study found that when the waiter or waitress gave customers 1 mint with their bill, their average tips would rise by 3%. This is where it gets interesting. What would happen if they gave them 2 mints with the bill? And what happened there was their average tip would rise by 14%. So that's pretty good going. But the biggest average rise in tips happened when the waiter or waitress gave the customer 1 mint, started walking away from the table, paused for a second, turned round, came back to the table and said, actually, for you nice people, here's a 2nd mint. And that simple act of giving 1, walking away, pausing for a second, coming back, giving a compliment with a 2nd mint, that resulted in a 23% average uplift in tips for these waiters and waitresses. Now, I think the reasons behind that, going back to this, the reciprocity principle, is firstly about creating a sense of social obligation. Someone's given me something, therefore I feel obliged to give them something back, in this case a tip for their service, but also making someone feel special. And that final example of giving 1 mint, walking away, pausing, turning around, saying, actually, for you lovely people, here's a 2nd mint. You're making them feel special, or at least they feel like they feel special. So the ways to actually apply this reciprocity principle, how do you do it in your marketing? One is to make people feel special, as I say, to create a sense of social obligation. Offer something exclusive, something that makes someone feel really special. This is only available to you. And I think the more exclusive something feels, and we'll come on to scarcity as a principle on the next one, but the more exclusive something feels, the more likely somebody is to feel really special about it. You can personalize gifts, so make sure they know it's from you. That's really important. Now, I see a lot of financial planners out there giving prospective clients a book as part of their engagement process, client engagement process. And there's typically 2 or 3 books that keep cropping up in conversations when I have these. The books that are being used are financial planning-led books about life. One is The Number by Lee Eisenberg. One is the book by Paul Armstrong, which will come to my mind in a second what it's called. There's a couple of others that people are handing out. Now, that's great. It's a gift. It's creating a bit of social obligation. It's this reciprocity principle in play, but it's not your book. And I think that's where that falls down. You're giving them something from someone else. So at the very minimum, I'd suggest get the book co-branded, or at least gift it in a branded box or a bag. So it's very clear that whilst you haven't written the book, it's not your book, it's come from you. So make sure you make that association in what you're doing. So that's the second weapon of influence, reciprocity. The third one is scarcity. And this basically says that we're drawn to things that are exclusive and hard to come by. Something that's hard to obtain, our minds, our brains view that as more valuable than something's easy to obtain. That's just a perception. We know it's not real, but if you think about branding for luxury goods, this is effectively how it works. Yes, they're scarce. Not everyone has one. You'd be very special if you do have one. Diamonds, luxury watches, the whole luxury industry is built up around this principle. And the ways to do this and ways to create this perception of scarcity, firstly, is to create a sense of urgency. So you trigger, if something is scarce, you think, okay, I must do this quickly. I must make my mind up quickly because there's a limited supply of it. There's limited availability. So limited number is one way to prove this. So lots of financial planners don't place a cap. Well, they have a cap on how many clients they can work with because they're only one person or only one team. They can only work with a number of new clients in a year, but they don't explicitly state a cap on the number of clients they can work with over a given time period. Why not say, in the next 8 months, I have got capacity to engage with 5 new families or 5 new clients. Place a limit on the number of people you can work with. The other one, which we see a lot in digital marketing, is limited time period. So when you go to a landing page on a website for an ebook or a course or something, you often see a countdown, don't you? Get this exclusive price, this discounted price for the following less than 24 hours, and the clock is ticking down on the screen. Now that's about limited time period. That's creating a sense of urgency, which is where scarcity comes in. You can have a never repeated offer. So, for example, if you have a business anniversary coming up, Informed Choice, we celebrated last month our 25th anniversary, you can create a limited special, never repeated offer. And then competition, so getting some competitive tension in there, almost like an auction format. If something is scarce, there's only one of it, there's only a limited number of it, and you've got lots of people clamoring for it, then that's a really, really powerful way of creating the scarcity principle. Now, I see too many financial planners giving themselves away and giving their time away freely. They're available anytime. You can go and see them evenings and weekends. And I think it's really important. This was something we talked about yesterday as well on our group coaching call. I think it's really important as financial planners that we make ourselves scarce or more scarce, if that's not terrible English, that we limit our availability, that we place value on our time. And actually, if we're willing to see clients in the evenings or at the weekends or any time they feel like it, they pick up the phone and say, I want to come see you this afternoon, and say, yep, no problem. You're lowering your perceived value by being more available. And there's a balance here, obviously, with customer service, client service, but making yourself more exclusive is great because we want what we cannot easily have. And that's effectively how that scarcity principle gets applied. Number 4 is the authority principle. And we follow people who look like they know what they're doing. Notice it says look like they know what they're doing. Not necessarily people who know what they're doing, but people who look like they do. So again, this is about perception. This is about giving the perception that we're in a position of authority and we know what we're doing. Now, if we're not an expert, the shortcut we take in our brains is to look for those with authority. It's easier to just defer decisions, defer a course of action to somebody who is a perceived expert. And it's easier to trust an authority figure than it is to carry out our own research. And one of the bits you'll see here is when you see things promoted in marketing as research shows or according to science, it's about giving this air of authority. And you'll remember at the start of this webinar, I talked about the 6 scientifically backed weapons of influence. It gives authority to the message. These 6 weapons of influence were based on scientific research by a professor, by a doctor. And he spent, I think, about 30 years working through these to work out the science behind each of them and make sure the studies supported his contentions. But things like research shows or according to science, we see a lot in financial services, financial planning now of evidence-backed or evidence-based. This is all about giving an air of authority. And there's other ways to do this. So the titles we use, and often people give themselves the title of director or partner. We use the title chartered financial planner. Titles give perceived authority. The way we dress is a signal of authority. And I talked about attractiveness, going back to likability, but within authority, the way we dress is an important factor. But don't sort of necessarily adopt the perceived received wisdom here, which is to have authority, to have this authority principle. You need to be in a sharp suit and tie. You need to be smartly dressed as a lady, etc. One of my favourite studies, and again I mentioned this in my introduction at the Financial Planning Marketing Summit, is a study carried out in US universities where they got students to rate business school professors, and what they found was male professors who wore a t-shirt, who had a beard, were rated as significantly more credible and trustworthy and competent than the professors who were clean-shaven and wore a suit and tie. So don't necessarily assume that it's got to be about a suit and tie, this authority principle. And then trappings, we look at trappings, we look at the car, the office, the lifestyle somebody follows. And that gives a sense of authority. If somebody comes along to you and they're talking about how you invest your money, how you manage your life, your financial planning to live the life you want, how you live a brilliant life and how you balance work and life. And they come along to you and they're poorly dressed and they're driving an old beat up car and they live in a tiny house in a bad neighborhood and they don't have a nice office, etc. You compare that individual, and again, we're not doing this consciously. These are the shortcuts our minds take in when we make these judgments. We compare that to somebody driving a nice car with a nice high street office, dressed well, nicely presentable, etc. So the trappings that somebody has. Now, I think that final one, trappings, it's really important that we balance that with that likability principle. Because for a lot of clients, a big turn-off is conspicuous consumption, conspicuous wealth. You show up in a really flashy car with a really flashy watch, with a really flashy suit, and the lifestyle you lead is just completely unaligned with the lifestyle your client leads, then they're not going to like you, they're not going to trust you. So I think this authority principle is really important to balance against the likability, the liking principle, to make sure that the two of them are not in conflict too much. Number 5 is called the commitment and consistency principle. And this means that we tend to stick with whatever we've already chosen. And this, again, is a shortcut we take. Once we've made a decision, we're faced with hundreds, probably thousands of decisions to make each and every day of our lives. And that leads to decision-making fatigue. It makes it harder to make decisions once we've already made some. We have a decision-making muscle in our brains, and it gets worn out. It gets easier to use the more you use it, but it does get worn out throughout the day. That's why always make your most important decisions in the morning when your decision-making muscle is not fatigued. But because we're bombarded with hundreds of decisions, hundreds of choices to make every single day, the way our brains shortcut this is to make a single decision and then stick with it when there's a similar related decision to make later. So when we're faced with a related choice to make, we refer back and think, how did we make that, or what was the outcome of that decision, which is similar, and we apply it again and again. So this is about commitment and consistency, is about getting the client to commit to something small, maybe a principle or a belief, something that doesn't involve parting with significant sums of money or signing a contract or engaging with you in a big way. So getting that small commitment first and then building upon it. And we talked at the summit about the value ladder principle. A mistake I see a lot of financial planners make, which is very easy to fix, is they try to go from inquiry to engagement in one single bound. They've got nothing in between, no interim steps. And all the value ladder says is you start small, you gain a bit of commitment, and then consistently improve that commitment and work it up to your big ticket item, which is a full financial plan in many cases. So don't leap from prospects to plan, but start small. That might be capturing an email address. It might be keeping the client up to date, prospective client up to date with a regular email newsletter. It might be hosting a webinar like this and giving them something of value. It may be giving them a worksheet or an ebook or an online course. But don't try and leap from, you visited my website and now come and become a client. It's too jarring, particularly when we've got this big trust gap in financial planning, where the media talks about Neil Woodford and talks about British Steel Pension Scheme and talks about PPI mis-selling. There's a huge trust gap to overcome, and trying to rush a prospective client through from they've heard about you to they're now your client is just, it's going to have a low conversion rate. It will work from time to time, but it's not necessarily going to land you with the most satisfied, happy client when it happens. So the value ladder. The other thing you can do is encourage public commitment. So when somebody expresses a commitment to a course of action publicly, they're more likely to stick with it. Good one here is when you make your New Year's resolution and you say, I'm going to go to the gym 3 times a week for the next year. Now, if you just tell yourself that, it's very easy to reverse the decision, to go back upon it. If you tell your friends and your family and your neighbours and your colleagues at work that, and you put it on Twitter and you put it on Facebook, it's a bit embarrassing to turn back from it and say after a few weeks, I know I said that a couple of weeks ago, but I've stopped now. I don't do that anymore. So making a public commitment is a really, really powerful way of doing this. And then rewarding people, rewarding the client for their commitment. So, well done, you've done this, you've stuck to it, great, bit of praise, or some sort of tangible reward. And I can't think of any practical applications of how to do that. Something will come to me in a second, I'm sure. But how can you reward your client for making a commitment and then being consistent with that commitment? So that is number 5. And then number 6, last but not least, is the social proof principle. We tend to have more trust in things that are popular or endorsed by people that we trust. And effectively, this is because the way our brains work is if we're unsure about making a particular decision, we look to how other people behave before, the choices other people make before we make a decision for ourselves. Was the outcome of that decision good or bad for someone else that's similar to us? And it's a shortcut, because if it works out well for somebody we know, it's likely to work out well for us. It reduces the risk involved in making a decision, in working with a financial planner in this example. So where do we look? Where do we look for social proof? We look to experts. We look to credible experts within the field. And if they are willing to lend their endorsements to a financial planner, that makes us more likely to trust that financial planner and go with them. So think about who are the credible experts in your field, in your local area, etc. We look at existing or past clients, and this is why client testimonials are so powerful. We're currently doing some work with a financial planner who has just filmed her first client testimonial, which is about to go live, and it's just so incredibly powerful. Slightly emotional, but to hear the pain this lady was in, the service she received from her financial planner, and how it solved the pain. You can't buy marketing like that. All you can do is try and capture it, in this case in a video format. If you're using client testimonials on your website, which I'd recommend you do, try and get the full name of the client published, permission to publish their full name, try and get a photograph of them, because we tend to be slightly mistrusting of those endorsements that sort of, Mr. F from Northampton or Miss S from Glasgow, etc., if they've got no photo or stock image with them. So videos are so powerful because you're seeing the person, you're seeing their name, you're seeing their face, you're hearing their voice. So we look for social proof from existing or past clients. We look for social proof based on the wisdom of the crowds. So we look at large groups of people as well for our proof. And the way I see some financial planners do this really well is where they secure sort of affiliations with different organisations. So the Chief Superintendent's Police Trust, or whatever it's called. We are now the preferred advisor for that particular trust. Things like that. So when they publicise that a large group of people have put their faith in them, then that's a great one. And then peers, so friends, people we know, if they're happy with the service, if they can endorse somebody, then we tend to be comfortable in that social proof. The other big one, the practical application here, I think, for financial planners, and this is based a lot on a blog post I wrote on Tuesday this week on bamfordmedia.co.uk, and that's PR, press. Press is such a powerful endorsement of what we do as financial planners, and it's so underutilised within our community. If a newspaper or a magazine quote you as an expert on a subject, that is a tacit endorsement of your expertise, of your trustworthiness. And it's why it works so well. And again, it's subconscious, it's a perception, it's not a real thing, because we know that journalists will speak to anyone broadly who has expertise and opinion in subject matter. And actually, journalists struggle to speak to enough people and to get enough different commentators. But getting published in a trade publication or in a consumer press publication, online or in print, and then being able to share that social proof to say, FT Advisor said, I was published in FT Advisor this week a few times saying the following, or The Times, or the FT, or Women's Weekly, any publication is giving you that tacit endorsement when you're published in there. So I think that's really, really powerful, and far too few financial planners are utilising that one. Sorry, back one slide because I've just skipped a couple of final thoughts on that one. Social proof still. Industry awards is another one. So the reason that firms enter and win awards isn't just to go out on a piss up at the awards dinner. It's to actually get some third-party endorsement. We are award winning, and actually looking back at keyword research for informed choice, the number of search results we get from award winning financial advisor, members of the public are searching that out. They're looking for an award winning advisor. They don't want just a plain advisor, they want an award winning advisor. The other one is client satisfaction surveys, and again, this is just evidence. It's perceived evidence of social proof. St James's Place do a brilliant job of this, with their 94% clients satisfied according to their latest survey. That figure and that client satisfaction, it comes up so often when we hear about St James's Place, even when they're getting railed in the consumer press, as they were last weekend in the Times, about the lack of transparency of their charges. The counter to that is always, but 94% of their clients trust them and are very satisfied with their service. So client satisfaction surveys are a really powerful form of social proof as well. Right, a few final thoughts on this one then. I'm very happy to take any questions anyone has as well on this subject, or any marketing related subject we can talk about. So do pop them in the chat box on the side or the question box below. Measure what you do against these 6 principles, these 6 weapons of influence. So think carefully about every element of your marketing and think, how do I apply at least one of those weapons of influence, if not more than one, to each one? And just by doing that, you will make them far more effective. You'll improve your conversion rate, but also try and combine them. So don't just stick to okay, I'm just going to pick this one for this bit of marketing, this one for this bit of marketing. Combine the weapons of influence, because when you add 2 or 3 together, that's when they become really, really effective, really powerful. But finally, do approach their use softly. And now you're aware of those 6 weapons of influence, I can promise you something. You're going to start seeing them being used, and you're going to become as skeptical about it as about all marketing as I am. Now, a few months ago, one of our local department stores, independent department stores, held a massive closing down, clearance type sale. And I was looking at the way they were promoting it, the window displays, the flyers we'd had, the emails we'd had, the social media messaging, the experience as we went through the door. And I walked through the door, and I know the managing director of the store quite well. And I saw him chatting to some customers, waited till he was finished, walked up to him, shook his hand and said, "Richard, Dr Robert Cialdini?" And he looked at me and said, "Yep." And he knew, and I knew, that everything that he was doing to promote this huge sale they were having in the store was based on these 6 weapons of influence. It's like back in the day, back when I first started doing this, so in the late 90s, when spin selling was the big thing. Neil Rackham's book, Spin Selling. And as soon as somebody started using the spin selling process on you, you could just say, "Wait, stop, I know this is spin selling, I know what comes next, I know how this works." So the knowledge of this, you do have to use and apply very gently, very subtly. And as I said at the start, this is not about manipulation, this isn't about trickery or any sorcery. This is just about helping people to make good decisions and making it easier to make good decisions by activating those shortcuts in our brains. So that's what this is all about. I hope that has been a useful overview of the 6 weapons of influence. We have some upcoming webinars. Our next one is on the 5th of September at 11 a.m. It's everything you need to know about lead magnets. We are starting to get some incredible results from lead magnets. And all a lead magnet is, in very simple terms, is a PDF download, typically an ebook, but it can be a checklist, it can be a worksheet, it can be a course, it can be anything like that. And what you do with your lead magnet is you host it on your website. You typically have a landing page, which is being optimized to get conversion, and you offer it in return for a name and an email address. We're doing one at the moment for a client, and we're linking it up to a system where they get an email notification. So 24 to 48 hours later, they can follow up and say, "Thanks for downloading our ebook. Do you have any questions?" And they can hopefully start engaging with them. The email address, with permission from the downloader, gets automatically added to their email list. So they get updated on a regular basis. So that's lead magnets, 5th of September. On the 3rd of October, we've got Buy a Client Bank or Invest in Marketing. This is a really hot topic. I keep seeing this on Facebook. People saying, "I've got an opportunity to spend X, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of pounds buying an existing client bank." And my response to that is always, well, if you're spending that much, why don't you invest in some marketing and acquire the clients yourself, the right clients yourself? So we're going to be comparing and contrasting those 2 options, and whether it's better to buy an existing client bank or spend an equivalent amount of money in marketing activity to acquire your clients. And then our webinar in November is 7 Habits of Highly Effective Financial Planners. So I've stolen that title a little bit from Stephen Covey, but that's the webinar coming up. Now, all of these you can register if you go to bamfordmedia.co.uk/webinar. I'll just type that into the chat box so you can click and get it nice and easily. So bamfordmedia.co.uk/webinar. Register for any of those, and also let me know what you'd like us to cover in these webinars. I've committed to doing 1 a month. We love doing them. I love preparing for them and making notes and researching the topics, etc. And it's great to then get questions and to get feedback. But let us know what you'd like me to cover. What marketing topics are you particularly interested? Jason, thank you for your feedback. Really glad you enjoyed that. Thank you very much. Graham, you missed the first 10 minutes. Yes, you will get an email automatically when I press stop broadcast in just a moment with a link to the replay. Tom, Noel, thank you very much as well. Thank you for coming along. I'm going to wrap it up there. Graham, thank you. Anyone has any questions, wants to get in touch on a one-to-one basis, please do visit our website. That's bamfordmedia.co.uk. Drop me an email, hello@bamfordmedia.co.uk. Get in touch. I'm very happy also to schedule one-to-one 30-minute video calls, and you can do that off the homepage of our website. So just next to my photo on the homepage of our website is a button to schedule a video call with Martin, and you can book yourself straight into my calendar. Although please not next week, because I'm away with my wife for a romantic break in Sandbanks next week, so it won't be around for that. But after that, I'm back after some holidays. Chris Studney, thank you very much. I'm going to end it there, but thank you for your time, and hopefully see you in the next one. Take care. Bye.